Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down the winners and the losers from this past weekend. Definitely a crazy weekend with plenty of losers, plenty of winners, and plenty of teams that are very, very confused right about now. Oh, excuse me. But let's jump into the superlatives for this past weekend because there were a lot of incredible performances, there were a lot of incredible games, but let's try to break it down a little bit for you guys. So let's start with the biggest game of the week. What was the game that really, really set everything off? Not necessarily the game that you got the biggest win in or the one that, meant that's a weird way to say it. I think the biggest win for this year is probably the best way to say it, honestly, because you have a lot of games that meant a lot for that program going forward, but did it mean the load that it should have in this certain year? So Penn State, they were down 14 on the road at halftime. Obviously, coming back, getting an overtime win is absolutely huge. This is a game that, frankly, Penn State loses pretty much every year in the past, and they were able to get this one done. Absolutely huge, and one of those teams that continues to move forward, playing really, really good football. If they get that from Tyler Warren pretty much every week, they're going to be nearly impossible to stop. So, really, really fun team. One of those teams that continues to just play really solid football pretty much week over week. Then you got Oregon. I think obviously this was a huge win for them, puts them in a really, really good place going forward. Favorites to win the conference going forward. Everything is on the table for this team, but I think they could have done that regardless, if I'm being totally honest. But at the end of the day, I do think that was a really good team, but my pick is very, very clear. LSU pulled their season from the grave in a lot of different ways on Saturday. There was a moment there where it felt like Ole Miss was going to be able to just win that one, get out of Dodge with a win, and LSU was going to be sitting there trying to figure out what the rest of the season looked like. Now they still have a lot to go. No two ways about that, but they just gave themselves a shot to where they can probably take a loss coming forward. They can go 10-2, still very much get into the field, and then they got A&M, they got Alabama. Let's just say they beat one of those teams and they run the table the rest of the way. They're definitely in. Now, if they beat both those teams, then you open a little bit more of a door. You can possibly go to the SEC title. You can possibly do a number of different things. So there's a lot on the table for this team. They have to play good football coming forward, but the way that Alabama's playing right now, I would call that game a relative toss-up, and A&M's one of those teams that maybe it was just a little bit of them playing their best football against Missouri rather than who they actually are. So I would definitely give LSU the biggest win of the weekend, although it wasn't necessarily against the best team of the weekend. Then we got to give the Heisman performance of the week, and frankly, there were a number around the country, but not necessarily ones that really, really stood out. So I'm just going to give a quick update on where we are with the Heisman because Ashton Jeanty took a little bit of a step back in his yards per carry. He went for 7 yards a pop, so definitely a little bit of a tough performance from the guy. But 31 carries, 217 yards, 1 touchdown. The kid is remarkable. He's all over the place. He's one of those guys that if you're not watching him pretty much every Saturday, I question what you're doing because this guy is so much fun. He stands back there like Grim Reaper before he starts running the ball, and he runs the ball like Grim Reaper. He's an absolute nightmare to deal with and cannot wait to see him the rest of the season. Then you did have the unfortunate news of Travis Hunter going down, and frankly, if he's out this upcoming weekend, there's no way he's winning the award. Whether that's fair or not, we can talk about that, because this is the best player in football as far as I'm concerned. He is so dynamic. He's one of the most dynamic players I have ever seen play college football, but at the end of the day, if he does miss a couple of games here with this injury, I don't know how serious it is, so could very well just be back on the field this upcoming weekend, but if he does miss time, I can't imagine he's going to get to New York and win that Heisman Trophy. And then Jalen Milroe effectively bowed out of the trophy or out of the race this last weekend. Did not play good football, and frankly, I don't think he's going to be able to get back into it, honestly. Dillon Gabriel wins this award, and I think that is a given, if I'm being totally honest. 23 for 34, 349, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, which was absolutely huge to kind of close out that game. He really shot up to at least the top 5 in Heisman. Didn't necessarily start the year the way that he wanted, but with a lot of people playing some really inconsistent football, you can shoot up to the top pretty quickly. Frankly, I think if Quinn Ewers has a similar performance this upcoming weekend against Georgia, you'll find him up near the top of the odds again. So it's one of those things that it's definitely a very fickle award. I still think Ashton Jeanty is setting the pace. I would have Travis Hunter 2 until he misses a game or two, and then I'll probably have Dillon Gabriel 3, and then or maybe Cam Ward 3. It's a very confusing race right about now, so we'll figure it out down the road, but Dillon Gabriel definitely put on the best performance of this past weekend. Then we got the statement of the weekend, and this has very little to do with what was the biggest win, what was the best win, all of that stuff out the window. who made the biggest statement, who did the thing that we did not expect them to do. And I want to start with Arizona State because this was the only true upset of the weekend. Utah was coming in with Cam Rising kind of limping in, and it definitely looked that way. He is going to be out for the year, actually, with a lower body injury, and if you were watching that game, it seemed pretty clear. He was not driving into throws the way that he usually does. A lot of ones floating in. It led to 3 picks. So a terrible day for him. Hate it for him. We'll see if he comes back for an 8th year. I'd be a little bit surprised, but obviously we have plenty of time to talk about that. But huge shout out to Kenny Dillingham. This is a very, very tough game to play, and one of those that they really just had to gut out, and they were able to get it done. Cam Scadaboo is an absolute star, but really huge win and definitely a statement for the Sun Devils. BYU also made a statement, at least in my eyes, because the reality was I feel like a lot of people were looking at this game just a little bit more sketchy. Frankly, I picked Arizona to win it because I just thought it's the Big 12. Things are going to go crazy. There's going to be a game this weekend that goes a little bit haywire. And then BYU just took care of business. They're playing really clean football, playing really confidently. Jake Retzlaff is awesome. So they're doing exactly what you want them to do. And it's really, really incredible what they're being able to pull off, at least throughout the early parts of this year. Vandy's the winner to me. I feel very confident in that because Vandy just had probably one of the craziest weeks that a lot of those kids have ever had. Players were doing endless interviews. They were starting podcasts, doing NIL deals, everything in between. And then they come out on the field against a really tough Kentucky team and just kind of bury them. It was really, really impressive stuff, and it's one of those things that Vandy just continues to answer the bell. I think everyone's waiting for that other shoe to drop for Vandy, and I don't know if it's going to. We'll see what happens in a couple of weeks when they play Texas, but at the end of the day, this is a very dangerous team, and whoever plays them better come on their A game. Then we got to get into the loser of the week. I hate to do it, but we definitely have to, and it's going to start with Oklahoma. That was really gross. The offense was as bad as I've ever seen it, watching Oklahoma by a pretty comfortable margin, if I'm being totally honest. And frankly, the biggest issue is there's not too much to be done this year. Now, you can get better pretty much week over week. I think Michael Hawkins is going to get better week over week. If that's your offensive line going forward, which it pretty much has to be, you got no real shot to put together a really good offensive game. Now, you can put together little moments here and there. Michael Hawkins can make that big run like he did against Auburn, or you hit a deep ball to J.J. Hester like they did against Auburn. But at the end of the day, if that's your offensive line, if you're rolling forward with that group, it's going to be a nightmare the rest of the way. The offseason is going to be huge for this team, but Saturday was kind of just a microcosm of what this team is right now, and they're going to have to fix quite a bit in the offseason. Another team that took a hard hit, obviously, was USC, a chance to salvage their season this past weekend where if they get that win, a lot of things could happen for them. They're a 2-loss team in a big-time conference with Notre Dame still on the schedule. Maybe they can make a little bit of a run. Obviously, still plenty ahead of them, and I wouldn't necessarily bet on them to make that run if they won this game, but it would have been a huge moment, a lot of confidence going forward, and they left it on the table. Definitely a lot of things that they could have done to win that game, but Lincoln Riley kind of messed up that final drive. That's really all I got for that team right about now. And then Ole Miss is the winner. No two ways about that. This is a team that very much was probably the most hyped, maybe up there with Miami, one of the most hyped teams coming into the year. It's October 15th, and they are effectively out of the CFP race. An absolute disaster. Obviously, they could hypothetically get back in like we talked about earlier, but let's be honest. With the schedule they have coming forward, I can't imagine they're going undefeated against that unit. And then we got the surprise of the weekend because there's a lot of things. These are a little bit more nitty-gritty than the other ones, but there's a lot of things that I just didn't expect that happened this past weekend. And the biggest one probably was the Oregon O-line just dominating. I did not expect that against an Ohio State D-line that is downright terrifying pretty much across the board. They are really, really deep, play incredible football. And they got nothing. It was incredible what the Oregon offensive line was going to do, especially Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius. They played just ridiculously good football on Saturday. So huge shout out to them with a huge deal in that one. And then I want to talk about the Wisconsin offense. This is something that kind of came out of left field because the first parts of the season, it looked like it was last year. It looked like very anemic. They couldn't throw the ball downfield, weren't making big-time plays. And then it all came out of nowhere. Obviously, they played Purdue, they played Rutgers. But at the end of the day, Rutgers is a fairly good defense. If you can put up 42 points on them, you're doing something right. So I'm not saying that Wisconsin's rolling down a hill or they're going to be really, really dangerous. But I do think they're a team that, say they put together a good end of the season here, put together a good offseason, maybe they're a dark horse team in the Big Ten going into 2025. Obviously, you're going to have to wait a little bit if you're a Wisconsin fan, but a really, really fun team that seems to kind of be putting it together under Luke Fickell. And then we got to talk about Iowa. By far, the biggest surprise of this weekend was Iowa putting up 40 points. I don't know how it happened, but at the end of the day, Tim Lester has made this offense not necessarily elite or explosive or anything crazy. He's just made them move the football a little bit more consistently. They use a little bit more motion, so Caleb Johnson has those opening running lanes. They, utilize different personnel groups at different moments. So it's really just they added a little bit of flavor to this offense. It's not necessarily an entirely different offense. They didn't reinvent the wheel here, but at the end of the day, they played really, really good football and just added that couple of nuances to that offense, and it's opened up plenty for that team. And then we got to get the game of the week. Frankly, this is a Sophie's Choice type of thing here because the reality is there are so many great ones. Colorado KSU was incredible. Illinois Purdue went to overtime 50-49. We had Bama and Tennessee get pushed to the edge, but I'll start with Penn State. This one was downright special. You had the comeback. You had big plays down the stretch. You had overtime to finish it. It was so much fun to watch these two teams go at it, and you knew Penn State really needed it, which obviously added to that intrigue a little bit in the second half where you knew James Franklin was feeling that pressure just a little bit more, and they were able to deliver. Huge win for them and definitely an incredible game. Ohio State-Oregon obviously was the main event. It was incredible to watch these two teams go at it. Two of the best teams in the country at an incredible atmosphere, one of the best in the country, and tons of storylines coming out of it. Where does Ohio State go from here? Is this season a little bit going down a wrong path? Is Oregon the new class of the Big Ten? A lot of things to break down in that grand scheme of things, but an incredible game, start to finish. Obviously, the ending was slightly anticlimactic, but really, really crazy game, and definitely one that I frankly want to see again, if I'm being totally honest. For me, it was LSU Ole Miss. I'll be totally honest. I thought this game was just incredible. It was a little bit all over the place, some penalties, some turnovers, some lengthy drives, or the lengthy drive to force touchdown, and then Lacey wins it in dramatic fashion. And I think for me, the biggest thing that made this so cool was it did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be much closer to what we saw last year, 50-49 Ole Miss win. We got a 29-26 LSU win. It was absolutely crazy, really, really fun game, and showed a lot of these two teams in particular, really LSU in particular, making that big time stride forward that could lead to a really, really successful end of the season. So an awesome week. No two ways about that. We had tons of superlatives that frankly could have gone any number of places. That game of the week, take your pick. It was absolutely incredible weekend. So many different games that were so much fun to watch. I just thought the LSU Ole Miss one had a little bit more juice to it. Maybe it was because it was a pseudo elimination game, and we got another one this upcoming weekend, but we'll get to that in time. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're just going to give quick thoughts on the upcoming weekend, just go through the big two games, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, and then kind of do quick thoughts about a number of other games. So stick with us, and we'll be right back with that.